Chapter 1: The Spare Key He Never Returned. 3 months, my younger brother said, setting a brass key on my kitchen table. You have 2 empty rooms, Elise, don't make this ugly. Nolan Ward had brought his wife, Serena Ward, 2 suitcases, and a folder labeled family plan. Our mother, Paula Ward, sat between them with her knee brace visible beneath her skirt. She was scheduled for surgery on Monday. In my first life, that brace had been the reason I opened my door. 18 months later, I had signed away the cedar-green bungalow I had spent 11 years saving for. I remembered Nolan replacing my kitchen floor, keeping a spare key, and calling his move temporary. I remembered Serena turning my office into a nursery before she was pregnant. I remembered my mother saying the same sentence whenever I protested. A house is wasted if family can't use it. They used my garage, my utilities, my address, and eventually my guilt. Mother had once lent me $12,000 at closing. I repaid every dollar, but Nolan retold that loan as her ownership stake. After a year of arguments, he presented a normal purchase contract at a family dinner. He promised to cover my remaining mortgage and let Mother live there forever. I signed because I thought surrender would restore peace. Instead, signing changed what every argument was allowed to mean. When Nolan left dirty dishes in the sink, it was his kitchen. When he missed the payment he had promised me, Mother called it a difficult month for a new owner. I kept paying part of the mortgage because my name remained on the loan during the sale process, while Nolan told relatives he was rescuing me from a house I could not manage. By the time his later resale closed, I had lost most of my equity to the discount and expenses I had accepted. He called the profit proof that he understood property better than I did. Mother's promised lifetime room lasted until her second fall. Serena said the stairs made their new place unsafe for her, and Nolan said a recovery residence had trained staff. I realized then that Mother's security had never been the goal. It had been the sentence that made my surrender sound noble. 8 months later, Nolan sold the house for a profit. Mother went into a cheap recovery residence when Serena decided they needed privacy. I spent the next 5 years rebuilding savings while working every extra shift at Harrow Building Supply. One icy night, driving home to a rented studio after a 14-hour inventory count, headlights crossed the center line. Then I opened my eyes at my kitchen table. The brass key lay in front of me again. "No," I said. Nolan's smile remained in place for one stunned second. Serena stopped rubbing Mother's shoulder. Mother leaned forward. "No to what?" "No one is moving in. You'll recover here for 10 days after surgery, Mom. I arranged a daytime aide, and I'll be home every night. Nolan can visit during the agreed hours." Nolan tapped his folder. "You arranged that without us." "I arranged care for the person having surgery." "We are the care," Serena said. She had always delivered Nolan's demands in a softer voice. "Our lease ends Friday. Staying here lets us help Mom and get back on our feet. Everybody wins." In my first life, I had not known their lease was ending. They had made my mother's recovery sound like the cause of the move instead of the cover for it. "Then you need another apartment by Friday," I said. Mother slapped her palm against the folder. "Your brother lost 2 construction contracts. He needs 1 season. You are stronger. You can absorb this." That was our old bargain in one breath. Because I paid bills on time, my rooms were considered idle. Because Nolan recovered loudly, every resource near him became emergency equipment. I picked up the brass key. The teeth were newly cut. "Is this a copy of my side door key?" Nolan reached for it. "I found the old one from your renovation. I made a fresh copy in case Mom needed us." "You copied my key before I agreed." "Why are you interrogating me?" I closed my hand around it. Because people who are asking permission don't make keys first. Serena's eyes slid toward Nolan. That tiny movement told me he had not explained the order of events to her. Mother stood too quickly and winced. I instinctively reached out. She pushed my hand away. "If you count every favor, don't call it love," she said. The sentence still hurt. Rebirth had returned my memories, not removed the part of me that wanted my mother to choose me without being cornered. "Care isn't ownership," I said, "and love isn't a key." Nolan gathered the folder. At the doorway, he looked past me toward the hall. 3 bedrooms for 1 person, he said. "You really want the family hearing that?" Tell them the fourth room is the one you rented without asking. After they left, I called Meena Patel, my neighbor and the locksmith who had installed the side door during my renovation. Meena owned the hardware shop at the corner and had kept the original work order. "Can you change everything today?" I asked. "Front, side, garage, and gate." In my first life, I had changed only the front lock after the first argument. Nolan had laughed and entered through the garage. "Everything," I said, "and I want a keypad with separate temporary codes." Meena arrived with her apprentice before lunch. I watched 4 old cylinders drop into a canvas pouch. The small metallic knocks sounded like a chain breaking one link at a time. Next, I put my ownership file, mortgage statements, and the message confirming Mother's loan had been repaid into the locked cabinet at my office. Memory was not evidence. The records were. I also called my mortgage company and confirmed that only my name appeared on the loan and payment portal. I was not expecting them to mediate a family dispute. I wanted to know which facts Nolan could twist and which facts were fixed. Then I photographed every room, wrote down the meter readings, and moved the household bills out of the desk drawer where Mother had always searched for stamps. Preparation felt colder than trust, but trust without limits had already shown me its ending. I confirmed the recovery aid and sent Mother a plain schedule. Her code would activate Monday morning and expire after 10 days. Nolan could visit from 6 to 8 in the evening when I was home. At 4, he replied in the family group. "Elise has decided Mom is a booking on her calendar. Serena and I will still do what family does." Aunt Harriet sent 3 question marks. My cousin Felix asked what that meant. Mother wrote only, "A house is wasted if family can't use it." I could have argued with every relative. Instead, I photographed the new lock and sent one sentence. "No one has permission to move into my home." Nolan reacted with a laughing face. Then Meena called from her shop across the street. "Elise," my neighbor said, "your brother just reserved a moving truck for tomorrow. He gave them your address." In my first life, I had opened the door because Nolan asked. This time, he had heard no and decided the door was the only part of my answer that mattered. Chapter 2, he arrived with a moving truck. At 8 the next morning, my younger brother, Nolan Ward, stood behind a rental truck and pointed 2 movers toward my driveway. "The side entrance is easier," he told them. I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee. Nothing comes off that truck. The movers stopped with a couch halfway to the ramp. Serena Ward, my sister-in-law, climbed down from the passenger side. She wore an oversized cardigan and an expression prepared for witnesses. "We discussed this," she said. Nolan announced it. I refused it. Nolan lifted the copied key as if it settled the matter. He crossed the driveway, pushed it into the side lock, and twisted. Nothing happened. Meena Patel, my neighbor and locksmith, was opening her hardware shop across the street. She folded her arms. The movers looked from Nolan to me. "She changed the locks on her own mother," Nolan said. "My mother doesn't live here," I answered, "and that key was copied without my permission." The lead mover asked whose name was on the booking, Nolan's, then he asked who owned the address. "Mine." "We don't unload into an ownership dispute," he said. "Where are we taking this?" Nolan's face darkened. He had expected my embarrassment to do what the key could not. Mother arrived in a rideshare before he could answer. Paula Ward, my mother, leaned on her cane and stared at the truck. "You made your injured mother take a car alone?" Aunt Harriet Ward called from a second vehicle. My aunt had come because Nolan knew she treated any family disagreement as a public relations emergency. "I offered to pick Mom up at noon for her pre-surgery appointment," I said. Nolan asked her to come at 8. Mother avoided my eyes. Serena took Mother's elbow. "We were going to set up before Monday, the small bedroom for us, the office for storage, and Mom downstairs." "There is no downstairs bedroom." "Then your office becomes Mom's room," Nolan said. "See, this is why we needed to handle it." He had already redrawn my house around his needs. The speed of it frightened me more than the truck. I held out my hand. "Give me every copy of the key." "Or what? You'll call strangers on your brother." "Or the movers will leave while you explain why you booked an address you don't control." The lead mover checked his watch. Nolan had paid for a 2-hour minimum. Every minute of his performance now cost him. Serena whispered, "Nolan, give it back." He dropped the key into my palm. This is why nobody trusts successful people. One little house, and suddenly you need witnesses. Mina crossed the street. She needed a locksmith because you kept a key for 5 years. Aunt Harriet's mouth tightened. She had come ready to scold me, but Mina's work order gave the scene a fact she could not smooth away. I turned to Mother. "Your recovery room is ready. The aid is confirmed. Your code begins Monday. Nolan and Serena may visit when I'm home. Those are the conditions." Mother looked at the couch on the truck. "And if I say I need my son here?" "Then you can recover at the furnished rehabilitation suite your clinic offered, or at Nolan's next apartment. I'll pay the aid either way." Her face changed. In my first life, she had believed my care and my house were one indivisible thing. I had never shown her that help could exist without surrender. "You would send me away." "I am giving you 3 safe choices. None includes Nolan moving into my home." Felix Ward, my cousin, had arrived behind Aunt Harriet to help unload. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Nolan told us Elise already agreed," he said. Serena looked at her husband. "You told me that too." Nolan did not apologize. He changed tactics. He pulled out his phone and filmed the locked side door, Mother's cane, and his loaded truck. "Let everyone see the choices," he said. "Film the key you copied," I replied. "Start with the part where you asked after you made it." His camera lowered. The truck left for a storage facility. Nolan had to pay the extra destination fee. Serena rode with the movers instead of him. Before she climbed into the cab, she stopped beside me. "He said you'd offered the office last week." "I haven't spoken to him alone in 2 weeks." Her lips parted, then closed. Serena wanted security more than conflict. In my first life, that made her Nolan's quiet accomplice, but it also meant each failed promise weakened him with her. I did not ask her to take my side. I only gave her one fact she could test. "Nolan hurt us. Don't poison my wife because you're angry with me." Then show her the message where I agreed. He climbed into Mother's rideshare instead of answering. That was my first victory, and it cost me the illusion that my brother's shame could stop him. On Monday, Mother's surgery went well. I drove her home, settled her in the guest room, placed her medicine chart on the dresser, and introduced her to Camille, the recovery aide. Nolan came at 6 with soup. Serena came at 6:30 with clean pajamas. For 2 hours, we almost resembled a family that respected a boundary. Then Nolan noticed the keypad flash when I locked the door behind him. "Mom has a code. A temporary one. What if she falls after you leave?" "The aide is here while I'm at work. The emergency button calls me, and the service desk." Mother touched his sleeve. "Don't start." For a moment, I mistook her weariness for support. During the first 3 recovery days, I cooked soft meals before work and slept lightly enough to hear Mother shift in the guest room. Camille logged each exercise on a paper chart. Nolan brought flowers once, then took photographs of himself changing the ice pack. Serena washed Mother's hair and stayed past visiting time only after asking me. Those ordinary hours tempted me to believe the moving truck had frightened them into respecting the line. On Thursday evening, Mother asked why her code expired the following week. "Because it is a recovery code," I said. "Family should not need expiration dates." I explained that I could extend her care without extending anyone else's access. She turned away. I noticed the distinction upset her, but I misjudged what she would do with it. I thought Nolan had embarrassed her too deeply for her to help him again. The next morning at Harrow Building Supply, I was reconciling a shipment when my phone showed the guest door opening at 11:14. Camille, the aide, had taken Mother to physical therapy at 10:50. I called Mina. My neighbor looked from her shop window and went quiet. "It's Nolan," she said. "He has 2 men with him. One is wearing a cedar-green residential services jacket." My brother had lost the permanent key. So someone inside my house had given him the temporary code. Chapter 3, the code my mother shared. By the time I reached home, my younger brother, Nolan Ward, was kneeling beside the outdoor water panel while a cedar-green residential services technician photographed the meter. The guest door stood open. "Stop the appointment," I said. The technician straightened. "Are you Elise Ward?" "Yes, I'm the account holder and owner. What was requested? Nolan rose, wiping dust from his jeans. A larger trash cart, a second service contact, and a leak inspection. Things this house needs if Mom is staying. The third man wore a cable company polo. A drill case rested near his boots. He also asked where to run a second line, I said. The cable installer closed his case. Nolan's confidence had depended on each worker, assuming the other one had verified him. The cedar-green technician checked his tablet. The service contact request came from Elise Ward. He provided an old repair invoice and the current guest code. We can inspect a reported leak, but adding a contact requires the account holder's confirmation. Nothing has been changed. That was the limit of his job. He did not decide who was a good son or whose family deserved rooms. He could only refuse a change I had not approved. I don't approve it, I said. Please note that Nolan has no authority over this address. The technician entered the note and emailed me the request summary. The cable installer left without drilling. Nolan waited until both vehicles were gone. You embarrass me in front of contractors. Who gave you the code? Mom needs me. Who gave you the code? My mother, Paula Ward, returned from therapy with Camille beside her. Mother saw Nolan by the open door and looked down. I did, she said. The answer hurt more than his copied key. Nolan had always taken. Mother had taught me to call the taking care. Camille shifted the therapy bag on her shoulder. Mrs. Ward told me her son was meeting a plumber. She didn't say he was changing accounts. Nolan pointed at the water panel. Nothing changed. Elise is making a crisis out of maintenance. I opened the keypad application. Mother's code had been used 4 times while I was at work: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that morning. I had noticed only the last alert because the earlier ones occurred during deliveries at Harrow. What did you take inside? I asked. Listen to yourself. I went to my desk. The utility folder had been shifted. One old invoice was missing. In the guest room, 2 flattened moving boxes rested behind Mother's suitcase. I checked the rest of the house while they watched. Nothing valuable was gone. The boxes held winter coats, a blender, and Serena's framed wedding photograph. That mattered. Nolan had not committed some elaborate theft. He had tested whether small belongings could become normal before large ones arrived. If I overreacted to the objects, he would call me unstable. If I ignored them, he would call their presence permission. I carried every item onto the porch and photographed it there. These leave today. Nolan laughed without humor. You're documenting a blender now. I'm documenting the first load you said didn't exist. Serena Ward, my sister-in-law, arrived 10 minutes later carrying groceries. When she saw the boxes, she whispered, "You said we were bringing winter clothes after Elise agreed." Nolan snapped, "Don't do this here." There it was again. He had not simply lied to me. He had built a different promise for every person: consent for Serena, medical necessity for Mother, routine maintenance for the workers, family duty for our relatives. I revoked the guest code. Then I called Cedar-Green Residential Services while Nolan could hear me. The representative confirmed that the old invoice had only been enough to open a contact request, not to change service responsibility. At my request, she placed a simple account note requiring confirmation through my existing phone number for future contact additions. It did not grant me special protection or prove Nolan intended to move in. It closed the exact administrative gap he had just tested. Nolan listened, recalculating. He could no longer tell a technician that the next approval was merely delayed. His next version would need to make me look illegitimate instead. Mother's face went white with anger. How am I supposed to enter? Camille or I will open the door. You have 6 recovery days left here. If that feels unacceptable, the clinic's furnished suite is still available tonight. You are monitoring your own mother. I am monitoring my door after you shared its code. She lifted her chin. A house is wasted if family can't use it. Then use Nolan's apartment. The silence that followed was ugly and honest. Nolan's 1-bedroom rental was too small for the arrangement he called reasonable in mine. Mother chose the rehabilitation suite. I drove her there myself, carried her suitcase inside, and paid for the remaining week. She did not speak during the ride. When I adjusted her walker at the entrance, she moved my hands away. You got what you wanted, she said. I had wanted her safe in my guest room. What I got was proof that she preferred leaving to accepting a locked boundary. That evening, Serena posted a photograph Nolan had taken inside my house. It showed Mother's walker beside moving boxes. Her caption read, "Some daughters call this eviction. We call it a lesson." By morning, the family group had divided. Aunt Harriet said public posts were shameful, but asked me to apologize first. Cousin Felix asked why Nolan had been inside after the moving truck scene. Mother's longtime friend Celeste Tran offered Mother her own spare room and received no answer. Nolan posted a cropped bank transfer from 12 years earlier. It showed Mother sending me $12,000 near my closing date. Mom bought the ROOMS, Elise is guarding, he wrote. He had moved from access to reputation. If he could make the house morally shared, every lock would look like theft. I did not post my entire financial history. I sent Aunt Harriet, Felix, and Celeste one page, Mother's old message saying the loan was paid in full beside the final transfer from me. Then I asked Mother privately to correct Nolan. I expected the repayment record to end the ownership claim. That was my consequential mistake in the new life. Numbers could answer whether a loan remained unpaid, but they could not make Mother surrender a story that gave her authority. By sending the proof quietly, I gave Nolan time to abandon the money argument and build an emotional one around her recovery. She replied, "Money is not the only kind of ownership." That was not an accounting mistake, it was her real belief. 3 days later, an invitation arrived for Mother's retirement dinner at the Maple Junction Community Room. Nolan had designed it. Beneath a photograph of Mother were the words celebrating PAULA's legacy, the home SHE built for all of US. My cedar-green bungalow appeared in the background. At the bottom, Nolan had added, "Special family announcement." He could no longer enter my home quietly. So he planned to claim it in a room where refusing him would look like refusing our mother. Chapter 4, The Home She Claimed to Build. My mother, Paula Ward, smiled beneath a gold banner while my house filled the projector screen behind her. The Maple Junction Community Room was crowded for her retirement dinner. Aunt Harriet Ward had arranged the food. Mother's friend Celeste Tran had invited former coworkers. My cousin Felix Ward stood near the projector because Nolan had asked him to manage the slideshow. My younger brother, Nolan Ward, raised his glass. "Mom spent 30 years building security for us," he said. "Tonight, we're making sure her sacrifice becomes a real family legacy." The slide changed to a floor plan of my bungalow. My office was labeled NOLAN and SERENA. The guest room was labeled Mom. A dotted outline marked a proposed ramp through my flower bed. Serena Ward, my sister-in-law, sat beside Mother with both hands locked around her glass. She looked surprised by the ramp. Nolan lifted a blue folder. "Elise has carried the mortgage, but Mom provided the foundation. We prepared a family occupancy agreement so the home can finally serve the purpose it was bought for." Applause began in one corner and died when I did not stand. Nolan brought the folder to me. The agreement was not a deed or an official transfer. It was a private promise he had written. It gave him and Serena indefinite occupancy, divided utilities 3 ways, and required everyone's approval before any future sale. My signature line was marked with a yellow flag. "Did I authorize this announcement?" I asked. He kept smiling. "Why would Mom's retirement surprise need authorization from you?" "Because the surprise is my house." Aunt Harriet hissed my name. Mother stared ahead as if my tone, not Nolan's plan, had disrupted her dinner. Nolan turned toward the room. "This is what success did to my sister. She thinks receipts matter more than people." I took 3 pages from my bag. Then one question should be easy. If Mom still owns part of my house, why did she write that her loan was paid in full? Felix dimmed the projector. I passed him copies of the closing statement, the repayment transfers, and Mother's message after the final payment, all settled. "Proud of you for doing this yourself." Mother's friend, Celeste, read the message twice. Aunt Harriet looked toward Mother. "Paula," she said, "were you repaid?" Mother's eyes glistened. "Every dollar, yes, but children cannot repay years of sacrifice with bank transfers." The room changed. Some people sympathized with her pain, others heard the admission beneath it. Nolan adapted before the silence settled. Fine, forget the money. What kind of daughter removes her recovering mother from an empty house? Serena raised her phone. A photograph of Mother's walker and the moving boxes appeared on the projector. Nolan had prepared for ownership to fail, so he moved to cruelty. I asked Felix to open the next file I sent him. It showed Mother's temporary code used 4 times, the unauthorized utility request, and my message offering 3 recovery choices. Mom was never denied care, I said. Nolan was denied authority. He used her code while she was at therapy, removed a utility invoice, and scheduled changes he could not approve. Felix stared at Nolan. You told me the utility already had you listed. It's paperwork, Nolan said. She is burying family under paperwork. Celeste spoke from Mother's table. Paula, I offered you my guest room. You didn't answer. Mother looked at me, not Celeste, because my daughter had room. Around us, Mother's former coworkers reacted for different reasons. Gloria Ames, who had envied Mother's polished family stories for years, leaned closer to hear every crack. Patrick Bell, who depended on Mother for rides to volunteer events, murmured that children owed their parents comfort. Celeste, who had offered a real room without demanding control of mine, looked wounded rather than triumphant. The crowd did not swing behind me as one body. It separated according to what each person feared losing. That was the wound she kept pressing. If I had capacity, she considered my consent wasteful. Serena lowered her phone. Nolan told me Elise agreed we could stay after Paula recovered. She was going to, Nolan said. No, I replied, you needed me to. I left the unsigned folder on the gift table. Mother did not ask me to stay for cake. The next morning, a contractor named Luis Romero called me at Harrow Building Supply. I'm confirming Saturday access for the Ward family home project, he said. Mr. Nolan Ward requested a ramp estimate and partition wall. Before we schedule, we need the owner's written approval. Nolan had learned from Cedar Glen that a family story could begin a request, even when it could not complete one. I did not request any work, I said. Please cancel it and send me the intake notes. Louis sounded relieved. Nolan had supplied my address, Mother's retirement invitation, and photographs from inside. He had promised that my signature would follow after the family announcement. The contractor had done exactly what a careful business should do: call the person named on the property record before cutting anything. At lunch, Serena messaged me privately. I didn't know about the wall. Nolan says the family workday is still happening Saturday. He says once everyone brings materials, you won't humiliate Mom by turning them away. I felt the old reflex rise. Cancel my plans, protect Mother from embarrassment. Let Nolan's overcommitment become my obligation. In my first life, that reflex had ended with my signature on a sale contract. I replied, there is no authorized workday. Tell him in writing. She answered, I did. He says you'll fold. Then Felix forwarded the family invitation Nolan had sent. Saturday 8-9. Bring tools, lumber, and love. We are making Paula's home accessible. My address was printed beneath it. Nolan had recruited Aunt Harriet to bring food, Felix to bring a truck, Celeste to bring Mother, and 3 former coworkers to paint. He was building a crowd whose wasted effort he could place at my feet. I could have left before they arrived. Instead, I canceled nothing. I sent every invitee one message. No construction or move-in has been authorized. If you come to hear the truth before taking anything off your vehicle. Celeste replied that she would bring Mother but no paint. Felix said he would keep the lumber tied down. Aunt Harriet accused me of turning a loving gesture into a trial, yet she did not cancel the food. Each answer told me why the stage still existed. Nolan needed visible labor to pressure me. The others came to protect Mother, their purchases, or their own idea of family. I would not confuse their attendance with agreement. Then I stood in my office and looked at the old brass key in my palm. Saturday would not decide who loved Mother more. It would decide whether a locked door remained mine after the whole family pushed against it. Chapter 5. My door stayed closed. At 9 on Saturday, my younger brother, Nolan Ward, placed a toolbox on my front walk and said, "Open the door." Behind him, 3 vehicles lined the curb. Aunt Harriet Ward carried foil trays. My cousin Felix Ward had lumber strapped to his truck. Mother's friend Celeste Tran pushed my mother, Paula Ward, in a borrowed wheelchair, even though Mother could now walk short distances with a cane. Serena Ward, my sister-in-law, stood apart with no boxes and no tools. Meena Patel, my neighbor and locksmith, waited beside me on the porch. I had not asked her to defend my ownership. I had asked her to witness what happened at the locks she installed. Nolan looked at the relatives, who had ignored my warning, and widened his hands. Everyone came for Mom. Are you really going to keep us on the sidewalk? You brought them to my locked house after I said no 3 times. They are on the sidewalk because that is where you invited them. Mother's mouth trembled. I did not raise you to make family beg at a door. You raised me to believe being able to give meant never being allowed to refuse. Aunt Harriet set the trays on the hood of her car. Elise, people bought materials. Let them build the ramp. We can discuss the rooms later. That was how Nolan worked. The ramp would justify access. Access would justify belongings. Belongings would justify occupancy. Time would turn his intrusion into a fact I was cruel for disturbing. Luis Romero canceled the ramp estimate because the owner never approved it, I said. There is no work order, no insurance approval, and no permission. Felix unfastened nothing from his truck. Nolan produced the blue occupancy folder. Mom approves. Mom doesn't own the house. She built it through you. I held up the old brass key. Did she tell you to copy this before you asked me? He glanced at Mother. We needed emergency access. Did she tell you to book movers before I agreed? Our lease was ending. Did she tell you to use her recovery code while she was at therapy? I was helping. Then why did every act of help move your name 1 step closer to my address? No one answered for him. I laid a slim packet on the porch rail. It contained the same 3 proof groups everyone had already seen in pieces: my ownership and repayment record, the access log and rejected service request, and Nolan's invitations after written refusals. There was no secret document waiting to save me. There was only a pattern he had continued because he believed I would break before he ran out of audiences. Serena walked forward. He said you promised the house by Christmas, she said. Nolan spun toward her. Not now. When then? After they cut a wall? After I move my clothes again? Serena's voice shook, but it did not soften. You told me Paula's loan meant Elise couldn't refuse. At the dinner, I learned it was repaid. You told me the utility added you. It didn't. You told me the contractor was confirmed. He called Elise. Her correction was not sudden loyalty to me. Serena needed a home, and Nolan had made her insecurity dependent on promises he could not keep. I believed we had permission, she told the family. We never did. Felix removed his gloves. Then I'm taking the lumber back. Aunt Harriet looked from Nolan to Mother. Reputation mattered to her more than fairness, but now Nolan's spectacle threatened the family's reputation rather than protecting it. You told me this was settled, she said. Nolan's charm vanished. She has 3 rooms, he shouted. Why should Serena and I drown in rent while Elise sits on space? Because my mortgage is not your rescue plan, I said. Mother rose from the wheelchair using her cane. The theatrical weakness fell away, leaving real anger. If you lock your brother out, you lock me out too. The threat struck exactly where she intended. In my first life, I had surrendered the house to keep my mother. She had moved away anyway. I stepped down from the porch and adjusted the loose strap on her knee brace. She let me, perhaps because the gesture looked like the old obedient daughter returning. Your therapy rides are paid through the month, I said. Celeste's spare room is available, and I found 2 apartments near your clinic. I will meet you for lunch. I will help with appointments. But no one enters my house without my invitation. You are choosing wood and locks over blood. No, I am refusing to let blood become a deed. Mother pulled away. She went home with Celeste, not Nolan. It was not reconciliation. It was the first practical choice she made after learning my door would not negotiate. Nolan loaded his toolbox without looking at anyone. The moving truck, storage fees, canceled contractor visit, and wasted family workday remained his costs. No authority arrested him. No miracle erased his debts. He simply lost the free house and the family certainty he had been spending like money. Luis Romero, the contractor, removed Nolan from the customer file and sent Aunt Harriet a refund for a measurement deposit she had paid without asking me. Cedar Glen kept the account note in place and did nothing beyond its service role. Mina retained the old lock cylinders for 30 days, then returned them to me. Every consequence stayed attached to the choice that caused it. Serena renewed their small lease in her own name and took weekend bookkeeping work. She and Nolan stayed together for the moment, but she stopped building plans on his promises. Felix returned the lumber. Aunt Harriet sent a short apology that did not ask for a key. Mother rented a one-bedroom apartment near her therapy clinic. For 2 months, we met only in public. She never admitted that Nolan had tried to take my home. I stopped requiring the right sentence before I could live my life. 6 months later, I converted the office Nolan had labeled with his name into a reading room. Mina helped me repair the scratches his copied key had left around the old side lock. Above the desk, I framed the final loan message from Mother, not as a weapon, but as a reminder that a settled debt should stay settled. On a rainy Sunday, Mother visited for the first time. She waited beneath the porch light instead of trying the handle. I opened the door because I had invited her. She glanced at the keypad, still keeping accounts, still choosing who comes in. Mother did not apologize. She handed me a pot of yellow chrysanthemums and entered alone. Nolan's name was never added to my utilities, my mailbox, my mortgage, or my door. The old brass key rested in a small frame beside the reading room window. In my first life, it had been the beginning of losing my house. In my second, it became proof of the moment I understood the truth. A house was not wasted because family could not use it whenever they wanted. It became a home when the person inside was finally allowed to say no.